This fateful auction will not only change the life of a wild horse. It will open the door to a terrifying family secret that the woman has spent years trying to forget. The strange connection between them is no accident. It is a promise never before revealed. A secret she has never dared to face. This story will leave you stunned, making you question everything you once believed. Could this secret change everything? You won't be able to stop, you won't be able to walk away until the truth is exposed. Join us as we embark on this unexpected journey, where nothing is as it seems. As the sun set slowly, the pale golden light of dusk filtered through the heavy, dark clouds, casting a mournful glow over the expansive, desolate auction grounds. The soft light faded, like a final farewell, drowned by the somber end of a day. Cold gusts of wind circled around, carrying the scent of damp earth, mingled with the rusting metal scent of the old, creaking gates and abandoned horse stalls. The air hung thick and oppressive, as if no one had the strength to carry on the auction any longer. From a distance, the sharp sound of the auctioneer's gavel echoed through the emptiness like a sigh from the land itself. The air was still, broken only by the sound of wind brushing through withered, dying weeds that grew like the remnants of a lost time. This place was a home to discarded wild animals, creatures deemed valueless, hopeless. Every horse in this auction had a tragic story, lives never to be told, now left to be sold like forgotten objects. And then, it came. The Mustang stallion, 7 years old, stood trembling in the ring. His once strong body was now a gaunt shell, ribs visible beneath the dry, cracked skin. His coat was ragged, patchy, with deep, ugly scars, marks of a life full of struggle, pain, and abandonment. His legs were unsteady, barely able to carry him forward, each step dragging as if the earth itself had become his prison. But it was his eyes, those eyes were unlike any other horse in the ring. Dark, deep, filled with sorrow and fear, but also a quiet defiance. It was as though this horse had seen enough to never be afraid again, yet still sought something, someone. Those eyes weren't those of a wild animal, they were the eyes of a creature who had known agony and loss, and wondered if there was still a place for it in this world. The auctioneer's voice cut through the silence once more. Mustang stallion, 7 years old, untrained, no history. Starting bid, $200. This was the last horse in the auction, and with a starting price so low, no one even raised a hand. Other horses had been sold, other lives chosen, other homes found. But this Mustang, scarred and wild, had no takers. Whispers echoed in the crowd, dismissing him as worthless. One man nearby shook his head and muttered, "This one's good for nothing. Probably just worth the slaughterhouse." Another man laughed, sneering, "No one's gonna buy it, not even at that price." As the crowd continued to murmur about the horse's uselessness, Shadow, the name Clara would later give him, stood there in silence. He didn't flinch. His bright, burning eyes scanned the space around him as if seeking something, someone, who could recognize the fight still burning inside him, a kindred spirit amidst all the pain. It seemed he had grown used to being abandoned, yet the hope inside him refused to die. The scars on his body were not just marks of brutality, they were symbols of a life filled with storms, relentless battles fought for survival. The people here didn't understand that. All they saw was an ugly, discarded horse. But in his eyes, there was a story yet to be told, a promise unspoken. The silence in the air thickened. A figure stepped forward, soft footsteps barely making a sound. Clara Owens appeared from the crowd, wearing simple clothes, a figure of quiet strength. Her eyes, like the horse's, carried the weight of a past she could not escape. Without a word, without hesitation, she walked toward Shadow. There was no noise, no grand gesture, only a bond, a connection that no one else could see, but both Clara and Shadow could feel. Clara approached him slowly, her eyes locking with his. In that moment, the decision had already been made. $200. I'll take him. The gavel slammed down, sealing the deal, and with it, a new life began, not just for Shadow, but for Clara too. When the gavel came down and Shadow became Clara's, she didn't just save the horse, she began a journey of confronting the past she had long tried to forget. Returning to Owens Ranch, Clara realized that, alongside saving Shadow, she also had to rediscover the painful memories she had been avoiding for so long. Clara returned to Owens Ranch, the place where she grew up, where memories of her father lingered in every corner of the farm. The rotting wooden walls, rusted gates, and empty horse stalls, all were marks of time, reminders of a past buried for far too long. The ranch, once full of laughter and hope, now stood as a relic of memories, like a barren land devoid of life. Amidst this silent space, Clara felt like a seed searching for fertile soil to grow, yet unsure where to begin. The memories of her father swept through Clara like a cold wind, carrying both pain and regret. Her father, a talented horse trainer who treated them like creatures with souls, had died suddenly and without explanation, leaving a scar in Clara's heart. She vividly remembered the night he passed away, standing outside his room, hearing his faint breathing, and then the silence when he stopped responding. His absence was like a flame that had gone out, leaving darkness to spread throughout the house and Clara's soul. Over the years, Clara had tried to forget the image of her lost father, but it was impossible. Like a storm that never passed, those memories relentlessly swirled in her mind. She could not help but wonder about the secrets her father had carried to the grave. Why had he left without any explanation? This question haunted Clara, pulling her into an ongoing internal battle, where sorrow and unanswered questions lingered, haunting her every night. When Clara brought Shadow back to the ranch, she realized that this horse had brought her back to the parts of herself that still needed healing. Walking along the deserted paths, by the old horse stalls, sharing simple meals with Shadow, all these moments seemed to offer Clara a sense of rediscovery, a feeling of finding something she had long forgotten. Her relationship with Shadow was not just about rescuing a wild horse, it was about confronting the darker parts of her own soul. Shadow, with his scars, reflected Clara, a woman who had suffered and been abandoned, yet still fought to find herself. Each time Clara gazed into Shadow's deep, dark eyes, she saw something familiar. Like her father, Shadow didn't speak, but in his eyes was a resilient flame, a belief that couldn't be extinguished. Clara began to feel that, in those eyes, she saw a reflection of her father, a man who loved horses but had also lived with sorrows he couldn't share. Clara gradually realized that rescuing Shadow was, in fact, a journey to rescue herself. Every time Shadow looked at her, it felt as if he were transmitting a strength to Clara that she had long forgotten. In a quiet moment, Clara heard her father's voice in her mind, as if he were whispering through the wind, "You must learn to forgive, not just others, but yourself." Those words, though simple, struck Clara like a powerful awakening. She began to feel the change within herself. It was Shadow, with his scars and unwavering gaze, who helped her rediscover the strength she had lost in the past. But Clara knew that, to truly heal, she needed to confront an unspoken truth about her father, a truth that would completely alter her life. She started going through her father's old journals, searching for hidden details, pieces of the family puzzle left incomplete. And in the process, Clara began to realize that her father's secrets might not only relate to the horses he had saved but also to a part of herself, a part she had never dared to face. Clara's journey was not only about a woman finding herself but also about uncovering a major secret her father had kept hidden for years. Clara not only found redemption in caring for Shadow, but she also uncovered an essential part of her past, a part she had never dared to confront, a part that defined everything she was today. As Clara began to find peace within herself, her relationship with Shadow gradually blossomed into a true friendship. Together, they faced challenges that not only healed physical wounds but also mended the emotional scars they both carried, helping each other grow with every step they took. Clara and Shadow had already faced many challenges together, both physical and emotional. The long days spent working on the ranch, from daily chores to the quiet moments spent exploring the empty land, strengthened the bond between them. Clara realized that, though she had saved Shadow, this wild horse was also helping her heal the deep wounds in her heart that she had never dared to confront. One of their biggest challenges came when a fierce storm descended upon Owens Ranch. Dark clouds swallowed the sky, and the wind howled through the trees like wild beasts. The storm arrived suddenly, and Clara had no time to prepare for the destruction it brought. The cattle needed to be moved to safety, but in the chaos of the storm, The whole ranch seemed to fall into darkness and disorder. Clara turned to Shadow, no words necessary, just a glance, and in that moment, she knew, despite their shared fear of the storm's fury, they had to face it together. Shadow, exhausted and afraid, stood firm, its eyes not frantic, but steady. It knew it was not alone anymore. And Clara felt it too. She felt a deep connection between them, as if her soul had merged with the soul of the horse. They threw themselves into their work, moving the cattle to safety in the barns. Each step of Shadow's, though heavy, was filled with strength and determination. Together, Clara and Shadow braved the storm, not just a physical challenge, but a testament to the trust they shared. She no longer felt alone, no longer felt lost with Shadow by her side. It was as if they had become inseparable, a silent bond that spoke louder than words. After the storm passed, in the quiet stillness of the land left in its wake, Clara realized that her relationship with Shadow was not just about saving a wild horse. It was a friendship that helped them face not only nature's challenges, but also the fears and pains within their hearts. But the real challenge was still ahead. One day, while Clara and Shadow were walking through a remote area of the ranch, they encountered another wild horse, a horse unlike any they had seen before. This horse was larger, wilder, and filled with rage, its eyes bloodshot and its steps powerful. It charged at Shadow with brutal force, growling as if it wanted to tear apart everything in its path. Clara sensed the danger instantly, and fear gripped her heart. The wild horse was uncontrollable, its hooves raised and aimed directly at Shadow. Clara saw the look in Shadow's eyes. It stood its ground, unwavering, its gaze resolute yet tinged with concern. Clara knew that if she didn't act immediately, Shadow wouldn't survive this attack. In that moment, Clara didn't just protect Shadow, she protected herself. A wordless connection formed between them. Her soul merged with Shadow's, and in that instant, she understood that they were warriors fighting together, not just for survival, but for the trust they had in one another. She stepped toward the wild horse, without hesitation. Her hands gripped the reins tightly, her body moving with purpose as she commanded Shadow to stand firm. She knew that if they didn't face this wild horse head-on, they wouldn't make it through. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the strength in her every step. She was no longer the fearful woman of her past, she was a warrior, defending the only friend she had. Despite being attacked, Shadow stood firm. With each strike from the wild horse, Shadow didn't retreat, but responded with equal strength, as if telling Clara, "Together, we will overcome." Both Clara and Shadow fought the wild horse, not just with strength but with patience and courage. It wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a battle that proved that, no matter how harsh the world may be, they would always stand together. When the wild horse finally backed down, Clara and Shadow stood there, breathing heavily but resolute. Clara looked into Shadow's eyes, and this time, she didn't just see a wild horse, she saw a friend, a companion who had helped her rediscover strength and courage she never knew she had. They hadn't just overcome the challenge, they had helped each other grow, taught each other how to face fears, and, above all, taught each other about friendship and healing. After overcoming the challenge with a wild horse, Clara realized that her bond with Shadow was not only about healing physically, but also unlocking the secrets of a past she had long avoided. And when she discovered her father's journal, the pieces of a hidden truth began to fall into place. One afternoon, as Clara sorted through old belongings in the barn, her eyes landed on a weathered leather journal. The cover, faded and cracked with age, still felt solid in her hands. Her father's name, scrawled across the front, sent a shock through her. Her pulse quickened as a wave of hesitation washed over her. How could she open this book, not knowing what it might reveal? Yet, the overwhelming need to understand the truth spurred her on, and with trembling hands, she opened the journal. At first, the pages were filled with familiar details, her father's meticulous notes about his work with horses. Clara read on, absorbed in the simple but loving descriptions of how he cared for the animals, trained them, and built a bond with each one he saved. But as she turned the pages, something darker began to emerge. Hidden notes, written in a hurried hand, revealed that her father had rescued a Mustang from a criminal ring involved in illegal horse racing and underground fights. Clara's heart began to race as she reread the lines, trying to comprehend what she was reading. The man she had always known as gentle, strong, and protective had been fighting a silent war that she had never known about. Her father had not just been a horse trainer, he had been part of a hidden battle to protect these wild creatures from being exploited by ruthless criminals. The discovery hit Clara like a wave. The journal opened a door into a shadowy world, one her father had fought to keep her from, and now it was all spilling out. These weren't just stories of training horses, they were stories of survival, of standing up to a world that used these majestic animals as pawns in dangerous, illegal games. The more Clara read, the deeper she sank into the mystery her father had tried so hard to keep hidden. She began to realize that her father was not just a man who loved horses, he was a man who had quietly fought to protect them from an underground world that thrived on cruelty and exploitation. He had not only fought for the freedom of the horses, but had risked his own life to keep them safe from the people who sought to destroy them. As Clara came to terms with the fact that her father had been involved in something far more dangerous than she could have imagined, a dark realization struck her. Her father's sudden death had not been an accident, it had been a violent attack, the tragic end of a fight against forces too powerful and dangerous to ignore. The criminals who trafficked in these horses weren't just heartless profiteers, they were ruthless, capable of anything to keep their dark dealings hidden. Clara struggled to understand why her father never shared this part of his life with her. Why had he kept her in the dark, protecting her from the truth, yet sacrificing himself for a cause she had never known? But as Clara read the journal, she began to see the true depth of his sacrifice. He had fought not just out of love for the horses, but because he believed, with every fiber of his being, that they deserved freedom, that they should not be exploited or torn apart by greed. Clara stood in the dim light of the barn, the weight of the journal in her hands. Her entire perception of her father shifted in that moment. The man she had once seen as her protector, the man who had always seemed like a steady rock, was revealed to be a quiet warrior, fighting a battle that no one else even knew existed. And because of this fight, he had paid the ultimate price. Pain and regret flooded Clara's heart. She realized that, despite her father's best efforts to shield her from the dark truths of his life, he had not been able to protect himself from the very forces he had been battling. Clara knew now that she could not let these secrets remain buried. She would not only continue his work, but she would also uncover the truth behind his death, bringing justice to her father and protecting the legacy he had fought so hard to preserve. Clara's journey was no longer just about healing. It had become a battle to honor her father's sacrifice and bring justice to the wild horses he had loved and protected. After uncovering the dark secrets about her father, Clara had not only found the truth but also discovered the strength to protect the legacy he fought for his entire life. Now, standing before her final enemy, she was determined not to let her father's sacrifice be in vain. The journey to protect the values he left behind was about to begin. The heavy iron gate creaked open, casting long shadows across the barren land as the faint light of the setting sun filtered through the cracks in the sky. Clara could feel the tension in the air with each step she took, the weight of every breath pressing down on her. Beside her, Shadow moved quietly, its eyes resolute, as if it understood its purpose in this moment. Victor Reed stood before her, like a ghost cloaked in the night. His cold gaze never wavered, and the sneer on his face was filled with disdain, as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. "I thought you'd back down," Reed said, his voice gravelly, challenging her. Clara didn't respond. She took one more step, her eyes never leaving his. This wasn't just a confrontation between two people, it was a battle for everything her father had fought to protect, the wild horses and the legacy he had left behind. "My father lived and died for these horses," Clara said, her voice sharp as a knife. "I'm not here for revenge, I'm here to protect the legacy he sacrificed everything for." Reed laughed mockingly, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "You think you can stop me? You're just a weak little girl." He charged at her, brandishing a long knife, the blade gleaming in the dim light as he swung it toward her. Clara didn't flinch, she swiftly sidestepped his first strike and blocked the next with a quick, calculated move. In that moment, Clara didn't just fight with strength, but with skill and agility. She used the environment around her to her advantage, the wooden chair near her, a heavy hammer lying by the firewood pile, every object became a weapon in her hands. She yanked the chair and used it to block Reed's knife strike, throwing him off balance. Clara didn't hesitate, immediately lunging at him and using all her strength to push him back. Every punch, every dodge was calculated, not just instinctively, but based on everything her father had taught her about how to face danger. As Clara fought Reed, her mind wasn't just focused on his blows and defenses. She could feel her father's presence with every step she took. "Dad always told me that if I stand firm against cruelty, I can protect everything I love." His words echoed in her mind, giving her the strength to push forward, no matter how hard Reed hit. She remembered the lessons her father had imparted, not just about physical strength, but about patience and bravery in moments of overwhelming despair. Clara understood that she wasn't just fighting to protect Shadow, she was fighting to protect the values her father had spent his life defending. The battle between Clara and Reed intensified. Clara could feel the exhaustion starting to take over her body, but she couldn't stop. Reed relentlessly charged at her, striking with brutal force. In one moment, as Clara was shoved toward a stone wall, everything seemed to slow. She crashed into it, dazed, and Reed's knife was poised for a deadly blow. For a split second, it seemed the fight was over. But then, in a flash, something unexpected happened. Shadow, sensing the danger, charged toward Clara with unexpected strength. The horse kicked out fiercely, knocking Reed away and sending him tumbling to the ground. Clara stood frozen for a moment, unable to believe her eyes. Shadow, the horse she had rescued, was not just her companion, it was a crucial part of this fight. As Clara stood up, her eyes weren't just filled with determination, they reflected the realization of what she was truly fighting for. With each strike of Reed's, each time he lunged at her, Clara didn't just fight with her body, she fought with the faith and resilience her father had passed down to her. This wasn't just a battle of physical strength, it was a battle of belief and love for everything her father had protected. Clara moved toward Reed, unafraid, her eyes filled with resolve. With every step, she made a promise to herself and to her father. No one can take what he protected. In the end, when Reed finally withdrew, Clara and Shadow stood there, not because they had won, but because they had preserved what her father had sacrificed for. And, after the battle, not only against her enemy but also against the ghosts of her past, Clara realized that true victory wasn't about defeating the enemy, it was about healing and accepting herself. Now, standing firm, she understood that her journey wasn't just for her, but also for everything her father had fought for throughout his life. And in this moment, Clara knew her journey wasn't over, it had only just begun. Clara stood silently, the wind softly brushing through her hair as she gazed out over the land. The battle was over, but the journey was far from complete. She looked at Shadow, the loyal horse by her side, the one who had shared her pain, her fears, and now her victory. The bond they shared went beyond anything she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about saving a wild horse. It was about two souls finding each other in the midst of their own suffering and healing together. As Clara reflected on everything she had been through, she realized that nothing in life is truly wasted. Every heartbreak, every loss, every struggle had brought her here, stronger, wiser, and more aware of the power of love and forgiveness. Her father's sacrifice, his unwavering dedication to the wild horses, had been the catalyst for her own transformation. And now, through her connection with Shadow, Clara had come to understand that the true power of sacrifice is not in what we lose, but in the love we gain in return. Looking back on her journey, Clara knew that the most difficult but necessary step was to forgive. She had to forgive her father for the secrets he kept, and she had to forgive herself for holding on to regret for so long. Only by releasing the pain and the bitterness could she truly move forward. Clara had learned that healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about accepting it, learning from it, and using it to become stronger. Her heart, once heavy with sorrow and confusion, was now lighter. She had finally come to understand that the pain she had carried was not something to fear, but something to embrace. It was through this understanding that she had become the woman she was meant to be, strong, capable, and ready to protect and love, not just herself, but those around her. As Clara walked beside Shadow, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She knew that her path was not over, but she was ready for whatever lay ahead. True strength lies not in avoiding pain, but in embracing it, learning from it, and using it to build a better future. The past may shape us, but it doesn't define us. It is through love, forgiveness, and courage that we grow, and in every step we take, we find healing and hope. And with that, Clara knew that she was no longer defined by the weight of her past. She had found her way to healing, and the road ahead, though uncertain, was one she would walk with her head held high, ready to face whatever challenges came her way, with love, courage, and hope in her heart.